President Michael D. Higgins has attended the lying in state of Pope Francis in the Vatican ahead of the papal funeral tomorrow. The President joined tens of thousands of people who filed into St. Peter's Basilica from early this morning to pay their final respects. The Pope's coffin is due to be closed in the next hour.
Dawn over the Vatican and crowds started arriving early for the last day of Pope Francis lying in state ahead of his funeral tomorrow.
We heard that it need to wait about at least 8 or something hours yesterday or the day before. So we tried as early as possible to avoid the crowd. So to pay the trip to the Pope.
We are waiting this moment for a long time now to come and see the Pope, and we're waiting since 7 in the morning. So. But now we're inside here, and we will go through and see the Pope.
Among those paying respects today, President Michael D. Higgins, who will attend tomorrow's Requiem Mass. As he spoke of what he called the Pope's generosity in seeking to embrace all humanity. A sentiment echoed by Irish clergy who will concelebrate tomorrow's funeral.
It was overwhelming, actually, just to see the number of people from all over the world who had come here to pray for his soul, to say thanks to God for giving us such a wonderful witness in our faith. And I really got a sense that people felt we're all part of one huge family, the Universal Church.
The funeral of Pope Francis tomorrow morning will see a huge influx of foreign dignitaries, 130 diplomatic missions, 50 heads of state or heads of government, including the US President Donald Trump, will all be in attendance. The Basilica has now shut its doors to the public, with Pope Francis' coffin due to be closed in the next hour. Fiona Mitchell, RTE News, Rome.
Well, here above St. Peter's Square, I'm joined by RTE's religion correspondent Alva Canale and by Father Martin Brown, who works here in the Vatican for the Dicastery for Promoting Christian Unity. I hope I got that right. Okay. Alva, as Fiona was saying, the doors have been shut now. The last few mourners just going in to pay their respects to the late Pope. There really has been quite a number of people trying to do that over the last few days, hasn't there?
Yeah, and from the moment that his remains were brought from his residence round to St. Peter's Basilica, it was really significant because already 20,000 people were outside the Basilica waiting to get in, and then 4-hour queues the first day, the second day almost 4-hour queues, certainly more than 3 hours. And then by lunchtime today, 150,000 people had gone into the Basilica to pay their respects. And it's just really a good sign of the popularity of Pope Francis. Now, if you compare to John Paul II back in 2005, a different time in fairness, but there was 2 million that went through the Basilica over 3 days. So it does, I suppose, raise questions as well as to people viewing the live view feed on the internet within the Basilica. There were cameras set up and people could view it from all around the world and see his remains laid out. So is technology an issue now that
people don't come in person?
Exactly.
Could
so
well be. Yeah.
Lots of questions, I suppose, from this, as well as seeing the popularity of Francis here.
Martin, we spoke to you on Monday on 6/1, just the evening after the sad news of the Pope's death. What have the last few days been like here in Rome?
Well, pretty busy, as you can imagine. I found, just after I left you on Monday evening, I came down onto the square and there was a rosary about to start, so I stayed for it. And even at that stage where the news was still new and there had been no announcements of events, but the square was full. And there's been rosary here and at St. Mary Major's the last couple of nights. Obviously, we've seen since as Alva was saying, since the removal of the body, huge numbers. Lots of preparations. In my own office, we're responsible for welcoming delegations of Christian leaders from all around the world, and that's what I've been doing for the last couple of days, is a couple of visits to the airport and then receiving our ecumenical partners, bringing them into the Basilica to pay their respects, rather like with the President and the state leaders. So it's been a time of busyness and anticipation, but very calm. Like, with all those crowds in the Basilica, it's still very calm and quiet. There's no pushing or shoving or aggravation. So it's been quite a nice experience. I've been in 3 or 4 times now with different groups, and each time it has been very, very peaceful and very lovely.
Now, I mean, you mentioned all the heads of state that are coming here. I don't know whether people could hear the sirens in the background there, but it's pretty constant up here. A huge logistic operation to get them all in, get them into the Basilica, out of the Basilica and everything. And the Vatican has to work with the Italian state to get them from the airport in here.
Yeah, it's a very complicated system, but they seem to have worked it out very well. Vatican cars and Italian police, and they managed to get all these delegations in and out with incredible ease. Italians like sirens, so it's very noisy, but it works.
Yeah. Now, Francis wanted simplicity, and he gave instructions for the funeral to be simplified to the extent that it can be. But at the end of the day, he was a pope. He was the head of a major world religion. He was also a head of state. So there is a certain amount of ceremony that you just can't avoid.
Yes, and it's also a very big event. And we've talked about all these delegations. So that, yes, it will be solemn, but it will be solemn, but not. Solemn but noble. I suppose noble simplicity is one of the things we often talk about when it comes to liturgy. He was very clear he wanted to be laid out in a coffin, not laid out fully exposed fully on a bier. Coffin normally sits, I think, on the floor at these funerals, and then afterwards he will be carried back into the Basilica simply, and then almost privately brought in a cavalcade to St Mary Major's.
Now, Alva, there will be some more ceremonial, some more religious ceremony in the next hour, and of course tomorrow.
Yeah, another solemn and noble ceremony tonight when the liturgical rite of sealing the coffin takes place, and that will be overseen by members of the Holy See, cardinals, and it'll also be overseen by the Irish Camerlingo, Kevin Farrell. Pope Francis wanted this to be simple as well. We go back to the simplicity. He is in one coffin. Normally the liturgical rite of sealing the coffin, it means putting one coffin into another. Previous popes had 3 coffins. He just has the one, and it'll involve putting a white veil over his face. There will be coins minted to reflect his papacy, and also a document which reviews his papacy as well, or gives a summary of his papacy. The coffin will then be sealed. It will be brought out to St Peter's Square tomorrow for the funeral. And that is it, yeah. We're into the funeral situation then.
OK, we'll have full coverage of that obviously tomorrow. Finally, Martin, just very briefly, a lot of talk about his legacy over the last few days. To an extent, does that depend on who his successor is and whether his successor continues on with the work he wanted to do?
Well, Pope Francis' legacy is his legacy. And I think certain orientations he has given the Church are not easily going to be reversed or changed, regardless of who follows. Each Pope has his own style, his own particular preoccupations and interests and impetus. But I think the prominence that Francis gave to care for the poor, the prominence he gave to care for creation, his outreach to all of humanity, all of humankind, that's not going to be walked back anytime soon.
Joining me now above St Peter's Square, where tomorrow's funeral will take place, is Emer McCarthy, formerly a journalist with Vatican Radio, who now works for the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. Emer, thank you so much for joining us. I did promise the viewers that you had a personal family connection with the late Pope. What was that connection?
The family connection is my daughter. When Pope Francis was first elected Pope back in 2013, we were expecting our first child. I was asked to do the translations of the morning Mass homilies that he used to give every single morning in Santa Martha. And when he found out that we had a baby girl, he offered to baptise her, and my daughter Polly Rose was baptised by him in the Sistine Chapel in January 2014. And it was a very moving moment for all of us. I have to say it was a very personal moment for me, because it had been a long time waiting to become a mother, so it really, really was a culmination, I think, of the beginning of that year of his pontificate. Lovely.
And you met him a couple of times. What was he like as a person?
He was, a very simple man. We've heard this in the week since his death, that he was a very simple man, but he wasn't an easy man either, insofar as he was demanding of us all, that we actually did what he asked us to do. For insofar as, he said you have to go out, you have to meet people where they need you to help them. You have to pay particular attention to the vulnerable. This isn't just a matter of giving money to the homeless. He says, I want you to stop. I want you to spend time with them. I want you to look them in the eye, shake their hands. He tried to help us to bridge that gap between saying we're Christian and actually being Christian, bringing it forward into our everyday life, into our everyday action. So a simple man who gave simple advice, but expected us then to actually put that advice into action.
And is that, I mean, is that for you? Is that the signature motif of his papacy?
Yeah, I think it was. I think for me, his legacy was his focus on the dignity of every person. That we have to look beyond our tendency in our society today to put people into boxes or to stereotype people. He wanted us to look beyond that, and he did it himself in his pontificate. I really enjoyed watching him move out of the sacristy, as they say, go outside the church, bring the conversation outside the church, and actually reach out to people who were not Catholic, who were not Christian, who were not even believers of any particular religion, and ask them why. He was curious as to know their opinions on life, on the great questions, and he listened and he brought them back in. So I think that for me was the great legacy of his pontificate, his ability to open up conversations with people well beyond the Catholic Church.
And he travelled, he visited countries, but possibly not the countries maybe that one would expect.
Everybody expected him to go back to Latin America, to South America. He was the first Latin American pope. And it was very surprising to everyone that he didn't go back to his own home country of Argentina. But I think if you actually look at the countries that he did go to, therein lies your answer. He was a Jesuit, he was a missionary. He knew that the church was growing fastest and was becoming bigger in Africa and Asia. Of the over 60 countries that he visited, 47 of those outside Italy, the 60 journeys that he had, 47 countries outside Italy. Most of them were in Asia. Most of them were in countries that were either going through severe climate crises or were, subject to wars. He was the first pope to actually visit a country that was in war in South Sudan, post-war in Iraq, or countries that were really in the throes of having to tackle with serious endemic poverty, such as East Timor, such as Papua New Guinea. And that's where his focus was. His focus was literally going where he felt the church was needed and the church could actually bring some form of contribution to the betterment of those people living there.
Now, he came to Ireland as well, of course, in 2018, a visit that was largely overshadowed by the issue of child abuse, clerical child abuse. Did you think he handled that well?
I think it was a turning point for the Holy Father in his own understanding of the impact of the clerical child sexual abuse scandal on the church. We have to remember he came from a context that wasn't as familiar with it as we have been in Ireland, unfortunately. So therefore, I think he shared with many other church leaders around the world the idea that, it's an Anglo-Saxon problem. It's not really their problem. I think by going to Ireland, by meeting with the victims and survivors of clerical sexual abuse, also it took place in 2018 when the crisis started erupting in Latin America, in South America as well. It was a turning point for him to really begin to understand the tremendous damage that was done, not only to individuals, their lives, but also to the church itself and to the society where this happened. So it was very interesting when he rewrote his homily, the final homily that he gave in Phoenix Park. For me, that was a clear sign that the trip to Ireland had massive impact in his understanding of this entire issue.
What about the position of women in the church? Because there was very high hopes when Francis became Pope that he would really fundamentally change things. And a lot of people feel that he didn't really deliver on that promise.
Well, I think with any kind of institutional change or reform, it takes time, particularly when you have an institution as big as this, as old as this. He opened the door to women taking their place in roles of governance within the church. He made sure that there was once now a place for women at the table. Is it enough? Hopefully not. Hopefully there's more to come. I really do hope that his successor will take up this area of his work in his pontificate and bring it forward. But one thing that's very important was that Francis, when he wanted women to be present at the decision-making table, he wanted women to be present not because they're women, but because they're competent and because they're qualified and because they're capable. He wasn't into tokenism. He never was. That's what I said. He was a simple man. He believed that women had a right to be present in the life of the church. And he put 2 women in positions of leadership within the Curia, which is like the government department of the church. And, he also had women for the first time take part in the synod, which up until very recently had just been for the bishops of the church. So he's opened the door. He's found and made sure that there's spaces for women now to enter that door, and we have to carry it forward.
OK, well, time will tell. Emer McCarthy, thank you so much for talking to us on 6-1. Thank you very much indeed. Now, a solemn mass was celebrated for Pope Francis in St Mary's Pro-Cathedral in Dublin this morning, where the pontiff was described as a humble man. Pope Francis visited the cathedral in 2018, and the seat in which he sat while praying remained empty as a mark of respect during today's mass.
Pope Pope Francis being remembered in the Pro Cathedral in Dublin this morning, where prayers were said for the repose of his soul.
As he left the balcony that evening in March 2013, he turned to the crowd and said, "Good night and rest well." Today, in turn, we say to Pope Francis, thank you, goodbye, and rest well.
He prayed for peace everywhere in the world, and I am, as Ukrainian ambassador, of course, thrilled to be here today and to pay tribute and respect to him.
I was in Dublin. I heard the Mass was on. I live in Tipperary, so I said I'd come down and pay my respects. Very nice Mass. They spoke very well inside. And through the Pope, Lord of Mercy, the poor man was one of the most modern popes in recent years.
Lovely man. He'll be missed. Very much for children and very much for Our Lady, so bring it on.
Pope Francis was a great pope. He really appealed to all the people on the ground level, and I guess I just felt a connection with him.
The congregation included representatives from the world of politics, parishioners, Catholics and members of other faiths, all wanting to pay their respects to the Pope, described today as a humble man, a man who lived the gospel. Diane Connor, RTE News, Dublin.
We'll have live coverage of Pope Francis's funeral tomorrow morning on RTE1 television, RTE News Channel and Player and RTE Radio 1 from 8:30 in the morning. Irishman Kevin Farrell has played a significant role in the running of the Vatican since the death of Pope Francis. Appointed as Camerlengo 6 years ago by the late pontiff, the Dublin-born Cardinal will also be prominent at the funeral, as well as overseeing the upcoming conclave to choose Francis's successor.
Devo annunciare la morte del nostro Santo Padre Francesco.
It was he who delivered the news of the Pope's death to the world, and he'll continue to play a central role in the days and weeks ahead. As Camerlengo, or Chamberlain, Dublin-born Cardinal Kevin Farrell is responsible for running the ordinary affairs of the Vatican until a new Pope is elected. He's prominent in organising the funeral as well as managing the conclave. It's thought to be the highest office in the Vatican ever to be held by an Irish man. Kevin Farrell was born in Drimna in Dublin in 1947, but left Ireland in his teens, joining the Legionnaires of Christ. He has spent the majority of his adult life in the US, a well-established Irish American, serving as the Bishop of Dallas for a decade. Before that, in DC, he worked as the late Cardinal McCarrick's assistant bishop. When McCarrick was fired for sexual abuse decades earlier, Kevin Farrell expressed shock about the crime. Appointed Cardinal in 2016, he became more widely known here 2 years later when he blocked former President Emer McCarthy from speaking at a Vatican conference to mark International Women's Day.
Welcome you, Kate Mila Forger.
Later that year, he was centre stage with the Pope for the World Meeting of Families in Dublin, his rise in Rome continuing. Kevin Farrell comes from a deeply religious family. His brother Brian served as a bishop for 20 years. It's here at the Our Lady of Good Counsel where they first served as altar boys. Decades on, from Drimna to the Vatican, he's now at the centre of one of the Catholic Church's most consequential events. Conor Hunt, RTE News.
Well, joining me again for a final word is RTE's religion correspondent Alva Canale. Alva, it may not last for long, but just at the minute, an Irishman, a Dubliner, is in charge of the Catholic Church.
That's right. And are you speculating that he may become the next Pope?
Well, I'll leave that to you.
Well, I think that the speculation appears to be Irish people in Ireland speculating that he may become the next Pope. And that's because he's come on the radar in the way that he has since Pope Francis's death. But there doesn't appear to be that kind of speculation here in the Vatican. But you never know. Jorge Bergoglio came out of nowhere all those years ago and became Pope Francis. And Pope Francis appointed appointed Cardinal Kevin Farrell as Camerlengo back in 2019, an extremely senior role, and he is now the authority in the Catholic Church at the moment. At the end of the day, the conclave is directed by the Holy Spirit. It is a mystery, and the cardinals choose who will be the spiritual leader of 1.4 billion Catholics around the world.
And I suppose the significance of that, we were talking about it with our other guests earlier, the significance of the choice is it decides the direction of the Church for the next however long the pontificate lasts, and it decides whether reforms and changes that Francis introduced, whether they stick.
Well, remember that he did appoint so many cardinals in his time that reflected his own views and the way he wanted to see the church going. It was pastoral, that's how he viewed the way he viewed it should go, and also all about community and focusing on the poor, and that is the way he wanted to see the church go. We don't know, though. I mean, remember that he emerged from John Paul II and Benedict. So things can change quite quickly, and we'll know in a couple of weeks' time. For now, the focus is on the funeral.
And the cliche is he who goes into the conclave as a pope emerges as a cardinal, because the front runner in the betting and speculation generally doesn't end up getting the job.
You just don't know, that's the thing. And as someone said recently, and it was a reporter, someone who reported on it, an American lady who had reported on Vatican affairs for years. She said Bergoglio was at the bottom of the list the last time around. She had to frantically find that list to give herself some idea of what he was about. And now we know what he was about. But yeah, it is a mystery, as they say, and we'll have to wait and see.
Alva Canale, thank you so much indeed for all of that.